Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to the Tony and Dakota podcast. Today, we got a very special guest from Kentucky.
Yeah, from Kendallville. I'm gonna let Dakota introduce Nate. Actually, I made some notes, but Dakota added some to it, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So
Yeah. So this is Nate Mosley. He is a husband, a father, a worship leader, a lead singer, and guitar player of JD3. He's a pastor at Grace Christian Church, and he's a title rep for Assurance Title, and he's also a genius. Not very many people know that, but welcome to the show.
Thanks. That's you have a unique idea of what genius means, I think. But I'll take it.
Yeah, but I actually do think you're a genius. I think a lot of other people think that too whenever they talk to you. But
Well, thanks.
yeah. But I just want to start off, if you could just talk about your past, how you grew up, and just kind of give us a real brief timeline of your history, because I actually don't know much about your childhood or anything. But
Wow, I didn't know it was going to be like that. So, okay. Well, yeah, I grew up mostly in this area. My mom was 15. And my dad was 17 when I came around. And so they, were together for a little while, and then Dad moved away. And so off and on, growing up, I'd go live with him. I'd live here, back and forth. Cool part about that was I got to see lots of parts of the country because my dad moved around a lot. Lived mostly in Northeast Indiana.
were you born in Kendallville?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember growing up, my one goal was I will never live here. As soon as I'm out of school, I'm gone.
Yep.
And then I think God had different plans for me.
Yep.
I think that's one of the big things people need to learn is how to flourish where you are and not think I need to be somewhere else in order to succeed, or my life will be better if I go to this different place or this different job. Or sometimes the change is needed, but you can make things better right where you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've noticed too, it's funny because I noticed that people over in Arizona or we go to Vegas, Miami, no matter where you grow up at, everybody says they're I want to go somewhere else. No matter where they're at, it could be the most beautiful place ever. And they're yeah, I want to move. I'm I don't get it. It just seems like it is I guess just you think things are going to be different somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandpa always said that the grass is always greener where the dogs have been pooping, So you always
Let's
think
put that as a quote for the headline.
You always think it's better somewhere else, and make it better where you are.
Yeah.
I think I had that same. That was really important for me because I had shiny object syndrome, and I didn't know exactly what it was that I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I didn't really have a purpose. Then I had a daughter, and so then I was well, if I'm going to be part of her life, then I need to stick around here. I really have the option to move. So it was important for me to be able. It was actually empowering to me to be able to say, okay, now I have to do anything that I can here. I can't really go anywhere else. I need to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, similar thing. I didn't get started as young as my parents did, but I started pretty young, and so my wife and we've been together 27 years.
Wow.
That I know I look like I'm only 27, but we started having kids. Basically, I was right out of high school, basically, and so I was well, I can. Early on, I tried to be a touring musician, and I realized, well, I can be a touring musician, or I can be a part of my kids' lives, and I think I chose the better one. So we have 6 kids now, and
wow,
and, yeah.
So what were you like back in high school and stuff? And then were you brought up Christian? Were your parents Christian? Because obviously, they're divorced.
Yeah. No. My grandparents were part of. They were Christians, but they were part of kind of a legalistic cult type of deal. Oddly enough, that group that they were part of, they didn't believe that you could listen to music or play music. no tattoos, no long hair, and I tick all three of those off, But yeah, so that there was a little bit of that, but no, I didn't really grow up in the church. As a matter of fact, the way I came to faith was really to sort of disprove that. I had some family members that loved to let me know I was going to hell, and I was like, all right, I'm going to prove you guys wrong. This is stupid. And instead what I found is something different, that, and I think that's really the big part of whatever your spiritual journey is it should involve the quest for truth.
Yeah.
Right. Not reinforce what I already think or feel, but I want to know what's true, and so that's how I approached it, and came out the other side going, oh, I actually do believe a couple of things they believe, and they were wrong on a lot of things, so, in my estimation.
Yeah. How do you actually differentiate that? Because that's something that I try to explain to people is that no matter what, you're going to have presuppositions because obviously you come up from different backgrounds, you have different beliefs, and you've built that up, and that's kind of your lens on truth and life is how you were. So how do you differentiate or put that aside to where you're okay, I'm searching for truth here no matter what the answer is?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is to be intellectually honest in life, not just in faith, but in anything, right? Because you're right, we do carry our own preconceived notions about things. But early on, and I'm not sure that you guys want to get into all the Bible stuff, but in Genesis, the first thing we see with Adam and Eve is that they were naked and unashamed. That means there was nothing between them, no made up things, no false faces or fronts, and so that's the ideal, is that there be nothing between me and my Creator, right? That I'm not bringing in all these other presuppositions. I'm just you can see me for who and what I am, and I can see you the same. And so that's what He wants for us, I believe, is to desire to know Him, and if you desire that, He'll help you know Him. I think I might have lost the train on what our question was there.
So it's just differentiating between your preconceived notions and actual truth.
Yeah, so if you approach it that way, that I just want to know what's true, and I don't want to reinforce this thing I already think, and that's a really hard thing to do. But you have, because to be naked in front of someone it's a vulnerable position, right? And you have to go into it in a vulnerable way, assuming that, you guys are probably like me. Most of the time, you feel like you're right, right? I start from the position of I'm right, and now let me prove you wrong.
Exactly. Yep.
But I want to be able to go into any situation and go, I just want to know what is right.
Yeah.
And then, start from there. And so, I mean, it's a difficult thing, I think, with anything, especially, when you're studying a topic that has so many strong opinions on different sides. But if you can just go into it with an open mind, right? That's, one of the things you probably heard that Jesus says, let the little children come to me. That's the type of faith we're supposed to have, is the faith of a little child, right? Most people take that as, like a dumb, innocent faith, right? Because little kids will believe anything,
right?
But you have a daughter, right? What's one of her favorite things to ask you?
Why?
Why? Right? That's the question we should always be asking, right? Why? Why does this work? Why do you believe that? Why does it say this? And that, I think that's what he's getting at, right? Is have a faith that, okay, even though you don't understand, trust me, like a child trusts their parent. In the meantime, ask me all the questions you've got. And that's one of the things I've been trying to work on in my own life, is asking questions. Anybody I meet, people will remember that you were interested.
Yeah.
And that cared to hear what they have to say. And, you know, I don't say that just so as a way to manipulate people or anything, but just, you know, I'm genuinely curious about why are you in real estate? Why'd you start this podcast? Why is the question that we should all be asking? And it's the question that, you know, that God tells us to ask, you know? I think people have the wrong idea, you know, that you're just supposed to blindly believe things. In James, it says that the testing of your faith is what produces endurance, what gets you through, right? Mm-hmm. And that word testing in the original language, it means to rip and to tear, like what happens to your muscle when you work out. Mm-hmm. Your faith might even fail sometimes. You might reach a moment where I don't even know that I believe that.
Yeah.
And getting to that point and pushing through is what is going to build it back up, you know, and strengthen you. So yeah, question everything and then have an open mind to what the answer is, you know.
Yeah.
And just, you're not as smart as you think you are, mm-hmm. you know. As right as I think I am most of the time, I'm trying to approach things more and more as if I don't know anything. Instruct me. Tell me why, you know.
Yep.
So there's a seminar series that Dakota and I like, and they sort of talk about how, like, naturally from birth, the nature of you as a child may be to be more open, to be more trusting, to be more kind, to have a wide range of emotions, and to be open to just feeling the way that you feel, not suppressing anything, mm-hmm. expressing yourself fully. You're full of integrity because you're doing whatever it is that you want to do because you're a little kid. But at the same time, kids are kind of like mostly about themselves. They have a lot of ego and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that specifically, because it's more of a secular idea, I guess, which would be that we should go back to the way that we were as kids versus
trying to people please.
Yeah, and then the opposite, which is that, like, well, Christianity specifically is more like, hey, we're kind of like bad right off the bat. So mm-hmm. maybe contrast those ideas. Like, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, there's one thing you never have to teach a child how to do is to lie, mm-hmm. right? It's built into us. Mm-hmm. You can see it, like the first time they tell a lie and they're like, mm-hmm. that worked, you know? So I think there is some of that, like our ego, it always wants what it wants above anything else, you know? And that's not all bad, right? You need to have drive and desire, but I think the perfect thing when you reach maturity is when you can be your full, real self and also still care about other people, mm-hmm. you know, because as a child, that you just do what comes naturally, what mm-hmm. feels good, mm-hmm. right? And what feels good when you're 5 years old is to eat candy all day, even though it's not the best thing for you. Mm-hmm. And to play and not spend time reading or doing doing stuff that's not fun. And that's all great, but you need better than that. And that's, I think that's a big part of whatever your path is or your disciplines are in life, is you have to reach a point where you can face yourself and go, I'm going to do the things that don't come naturally. And in Christianity especially, we're not called to do what comes natural. We're called to lead supernatural lives, to be different on purpose. And so what comes easy to you, sometimes that can be a strength that you can use, right? But if that's all you do is just play to the strengths you have, you're not going to grow. And you need to do the things that don't come naturally and that aren't easy, right? And like, my body always wants what's worse for it. Mm-hmm. When I'm hungry, I would much rather have pizza than a salad, mm-hmm. But am I willing to push through that uncomfortableness and, do what's best? So yeah, I'm not sure about the seminar you're talking about, but that return to who you were as a child, I think that's great, right? Embrace who you are, but still be willing to do the things that
are best for you.
Are not comfortable, right? Because the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same thing. You know.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to talking about like the basically like blind faith versus like asking questions, because like I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but I don't even know if you know this or if I've ever told you, but I would say like the reason that I'm a Christian today is because of you and your influence on me. So like, you know, the impact that you had on my life is like crazy. So like, first of all, thank you for that.
Oh.
But then also like, how important do you think that is then to like be able to ask those questions? Because like, you know, my parents were not like that. They were always just like, oh, you just got to believe on faith. And I was like, yeah, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that, because I want to know the truth, and I was seeking the truth. And yeah, you were actually willing to answer the questions. So like, if you could elaborate a little bit more on like maybe like talk to, you know, the parents that are their kids are asking this, because like I think that a lot of parents just say just believe it, and they don't actually know the answer. So how important do you think that is to like actually help people work through that and to not just be upset with them for asking questions?
Yeah, that's a unfortunate thing, right? Is when we're questioned on something, especially something that we never took the time to question, we just get angry. You know. Look, if you don't question things and really dig into it, nothing will ever be better. Nothing will ever change. And you know, that may have worked for your parents, but and I know I've said this to my own kids, like when I tell them to do something and they say why, and I say because I said so.
Yeah.
Right. That's a dumb, angry answer. You know, the better answer is, well, because you know it's better for you. This is what we need done, and you know, whatever. Explain the thing. And I think a lot of people approach faith that way. Just do it because I said so. Because I never bothered to ask this question, so I don't really know how to answer it. So let's just pretend that I know, you know.
What do you think the solution is?
The solution to that? I think it kind of circles back to what we were talking about. Like, look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, I'm willing to do what's uncomfortable and, you know, be intellectually honest here. You know, and I'm still wrestling with things. I've been in ministry for 20 some years. There are still things that I'm re-looking at and going, you know, I've just always believed this because I heard someone preach it or whatever. Let me really re-examine that and go, you know, is that what it says in the original Greek or you know?
Yeah.
And you know, there's some things I still can't quite nail down. Yeah, I don't know. I think the only solution is to be willing to do the thing that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
You know, to do the research and do the work. And, yeah.
Yep.
What got you into the work originally? So what was your story before? Did you have other jobs before you decided that you wanted to get into ministry? And then what was the push? What was the thing?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I've bounced around in a few different fields. I've been in real estate and title and lending and stuff for almost about the same amount of time that I've been in ministry. But prior to that, I'd worked in a factory. I was a supervisor in a union shop. That was unpleasant, you know. That the one thing I learned from that job was that I don't want to do this the rest of my life. But yeah, so I've done, you know, manual labor. I've done office work and everything in between. I've been a working musician. I still do that a little bit. But when I got involved in ministry, it wasn't as a vocation. It was just something that I wanted to help other people not make the mistakes I had made, and to help other people understand the word a little better, because no one had helped me early on. And so that was really my main concern. And then over the years, that morphed into my church asking me to come on full time. But yeah,
awesome.
So yeah, I didn't ever set out to be like my career is going to be in ministry. And also, if that's something you're thinking about, I hope you're prepared to also take a vow of poverty, because it's not a great financial career path. Yeah.
Unless you're Joel Osteen.
Well, yeah, yeah, and then the groups where you can make a lot of money, they really question that group.
Looser morals.
Yeah.
So, what do you think that people like misunderstand most about Christianity?
Boy,
we threw all the easy questions out.
Yeah. See, I thought we were going to talk about like real estate and investing.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. No. What do I think is most misunderstood? I think, for one, the character of God. I don't mean like the biography of him, but what his nature is. I think most people have the impression that God is the universal school principal.
Mm-hmm.
He's waiting to catch you in some violation in order to punish you, and that's the last thing he wants. And also, there are enough churches and Christians out there that do believe that it's really distorted the image of who I believe he is in his word. One of the things that we're taught early on is the concept of God as a father, right? God the Father. Well, he used that imagery for a reason, to teach us something about his nature, right? And the image should be that, well, a father is always there for you. He makes you feel safe and secure. He loves you unconditionally, but he's willing to discipline you in order to help you grow and be the best you can be, right? Those are the concepts we're supposed to take. The problem is most of us have fathers that don't represent all of those things, or any of them maybe. Maybe you have a father who was never there, or a father that you could never depend on, who was abusive, who showed you no love and only hate or anger, and so that I think has distorted our picture of who God is, and makes us just assume that he's against me, not for me. So yeah, getting the right picture of his character. And also that it's not just a bunch of, weird rituals and stuff. There's more, there's something better he wants for you than that.
Yeah.
So I had a question more about traditions, because your church is a little less traditional from my experience, and Dakota's been there more than me. But I know that there's like this little clip in Rick and Morty where the dad is talking, and he's like, well, traditionally, science fair projects are a father-son thing. And then Rick goes, well, scientifically, traditions are an idiot thing. So
that's a fairly good Rick. Yeah.
When you look at churches who do like the stand up, sit down, rah, 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 recite the saying, now we pray, now we don't, what do you think of them? Are traditions an idiot thing? How important are traditions? No, that's the hip, cool thing to say in Christianese. Is we're not into traditions and all that, but not all traditions are bad, right? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of traditions are there because they worked, right? They're if you find a teaching method that works, that becomes a tradition, right? And until it doesn't work, why get rid of it? And as a matter of fact, that's one of the things we've been looking at, because we basically had none of the conventional traditions at our church, but over time we've learned, okay, some of these are not so bad, and trying to look at, is this a teaching tool, or is it just a thing that we all do
mechanically without any thought behind it, you know. Because, once a tradition becomes just that, just a tradition, and it's not serving another purpose, then get rid of it, you know. But I don't think it's traditions necessarily are for idiots. I think if they're serving their purpose, which is, to reinforce things, to remind you of truths, and, take you to a deeper place with it, by all means, keep it up. But once it loses that, you've lost the point of it.
Yeah, it's funny because I was at a Catholic wedding, and I've never been to a Catholic anything, and they kept like reciting things that were memorized, and then we were standing up, sitting down, and like to me, I was like, I got a little frustrated because it did feel like exactly. I felt like there was no meaning behind it, but not just no meaning or meaning, but also like I felt like there was judgment from other people that I didn't know it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you guys are going to use this as like, oh, now you're better than me because I don't know this? I'm like, this is so weird to me now. And like, it felt like this is the opposite of like what we're actually supposed to be doing here. Like, we're supposed to be deepening our connection with God. And right now it feels like you're using this as like a I know more than you kind of thing. And it felt very weird.
Yeah. That's, like I said, that's the danger of traditions, I guess, or one of the dangers. It's funny, like one of the early traditions of the church, it still holds its place in our society today, would be like the Lord's Prayer. When I was in high school playing football, we said the Lord's Prayer before every game, and
it's like the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah,
you
right.
say it.
And what's so hilarious about that one, it shows our desire to have rules and traditions, is if you were to read that passage in context, Jesus' disciples say, Lord, teach us how to pray. And then he says, oh, okay. Well, when you pray, don't be like these people who use just vain repetition, right? In other words, don't just repeat memorized things, but pray in this way. And so he's modeling like a style of prayer. And we went, right, repeat those words. It's the exact opposite of what he meant, right?
That is funny.
But yeah, so people gravitate toward order, and even if it's not the best thing for them, they're just looking for some kind of order in the chaos, right? That's why fascist leaders come into power. Everybody wants a strong man to just lead them. Whether we admit it or not, right? We just want somebody to be in charge.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happens after, just at least somebody's in charge. And, and I think a lot of traditions are that way. At least, okay, I know what to expect. This is the order things are going to go in, Well,
it's interesting you talk about strength. I actually had that as one of my questions too. So this was something that I heard, and I don't know if you want to confirm it or not, but I think it's funny too, being more conservative, you'll see a lot of Christians have guns, and then the disciples had a couple swords. Not everybody had a sword on them, but they had a couple. And so then I'm wondering, how something that Jordan Peterson said, which I'm not sure if he's a false prophet or a follower, depending on what you hear about him.
I love him. He chases truth, right? And I'm all for that. So
he says,
anyway, what did he say? Yeah.
He says you shouldn't be weak. Like, you shouldn't aspire to be a coward. Like, you should be a monster, and then you should learn how to control that. So how important is that for the Christian community to see strong men and strong leaders, and what does that look like?
Yeah, you guys are just trying to open every can of worms, right? I actually just got into a little bit of trouble at my church here not too long ago because I was talking a little bit about this, that despite popular opinion, Jesus is not a capitalist or a Republican. We've tried to tie him to that, especially in Western American society, right? I don't want to say what political affiliations he would have, right? He was a theist. You should make me king. That's what you should do. what we see, you know, when it comes to economic policy, he says if you have extra, if you have more than you need, I provided that to you so that you could help someone else.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of goes against
Capitalism.
a little bit, you know. And, you know, he says, you know, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. You should turn the other cheek and pray for those who persecute you. And those run counter to the general view of who Jesus is, because we've kind of, like going back to what we said earlier, we've lost the nature of who God is, right? And I mean, God is powerful and He has wrath and all of that, but Jesus has called us to something greater than that. And so strength, I don't think, shouldn't be about might makes right. It should be strength under control, right? Because what's more effective? A wild stallion, he's full of muscle and testosterone, but you can't ride him. Or a horse that's been broken and will do exactly what you need a horse to do, right? That's the trick, right? Be a monster and then have control of it. You know? Use your power for good.
Yep. Yeah, I had somebody ask me that. It was actually Jonathan. He was asking me the other day. He's like, "Man, do you just you feel way better knowing that you can beat somebody in a fight and stuff? And if they smart off to you, just go over there and beat the crap out of them." I was like, not really. Actually, what it does for me though is it makes me feel like I don't need to, because I already I know that I can handle myself if I need to. So I now no longer feel like I have to prove it. So if I didn't have that same sense of oh, I can fight, I would probably feel the need oh, I got to go and show this person that you don't disrespect me, and I don't even know how to fight, but I already know that I can. So now I feel I don't need to prove it to myself, because I have enough self-confidence and belief that I'm I don't need to prove anything to this guy. It is what it is, and I feel confident enough in myself that I don't need to go and prove it to him. So
yeah, you see that the guy that comes in the room and needs to make sure everybody knows he's in charge. All that shows us is you're not really in charge.
Yeah.
You're too insecure,
Yep.
And I think all three of us have a little bit of background in combat sports, and the guy that's always puffing his chest up usually is the one that can't fight.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
Yep. So we talked a little bit about it, but Tony actually had this down: goofy, fun, nerdy, Star Wars. Is this how our pastor's supposed to be? I think about that a little bit more as like Christianity. I feel like people put views on who you're supposed to be as a Christian, which is kind of what we're talking about here. Is you have to be a certain way. How do you feel because I definitely think that you're different from the norm, because you actually do think about what the truth is, and you remember that you still can be those things. You can still be fun. You can be passionate. You can still do those things. So how do you, I guess, do that whenever you're getting so much pressure? And what do you think you're supposed to be called to be as a Christian? What is a true definition of who a Christian is supposed to be, and how do you still have fun?
Wow. Okay, just all these softballs you keep pitching me. One of my favorite stories from the Old Testament is Gideon. And there's a few things that happen with Gideon, but when we first encounter him, it's during this time when the Israelites, their property is constantly being raided, and if you had an abundance of anything, these outsiders were just going to come and take it. And so he's trying to thresh his little bit of grain at night, which is not ideal, but it's the only way he can get away with, preserving what he's got. And God sends an angel to speak to him, and he greets him with, calling him a valiant warrior. And this is a coward, right? This is a guy who's hiding in the middle of the night just to avoid a fight, to get his little bit of grain and hide it away. And he calls him a valiant warrior, and this guy's never fought a fight. And Gideon even is like, no, I'm not a valiant warrior, you know. But God sees you for who you can be, not who you are. You know, He wants the best for you, and to be the best Dakota you can be. You know, and He sees all future and no past. And for many people in Christianity, I think we identify some Christian in our life and go, okay, that's what a good Christian looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to be that. And that's fine. You know, learn what you can from people. Absolutely. If somebody models something really well, learn from them. But they don't have it all figured out. Mm-hmm. They have things in their life that they're still trying to sort through. Jesus doesn't call us to be like other disciples. He says, follow me and be like me. And so that's always the test, right? That's the litmus test is, well, to be a little bit hokey, you remember the bracelets and stuff that went around back in the early 2000s, the what would Jesus do?
Oh, yeah.
That's a fair question, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would someone better than me deal with this person right now? Mm-hmm. Rather than me doing what comes naturally, my temper's flaring up, or I want to insult them, or I want to be rude. What would someone who's a bigger man than me do? And then do that, you know?
Mm-hmm. So you can still have fun as a Christian?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we kind of lost it. Yeah. So yeah, part of that is be you, right? Like one of the things I see in the scripture is Jesus, like he makes jokes.
Yeah.
You know, we don't read it that way sometimes, but yeah, he is a little bit sarcastic with the Pharisees, and he had fun.
Yeah.
And the only problem is in the scripture it doesn't say, and then he laughed, you know,
right?
Or but he designed you with certain innate talents and personality traits. And I know people say, oh, no, that's all nurture, but your dad, there were certain things that when your daughter was 2 or 3 months old, you could already see that are in her now, right? Their personality is baked in, and then you can have a little bit of play and forming it from there. And same thing, you have some traits baked in. And in Ephesians 2, it says that by grace you've been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it's a gift of God, so that no one may boast. And then the next verse, the one that no one ever reads, is that he has laid out works before you that you would walk in them, right? That God already had a plan for you. Here are some great things that you will be perfectly suited for, and it'll make your life great.
Yep.
You don't have to do them, but I've prepared them for you, but you don't have to, because God's a gentleman. Forced love will, well, that's a crime, right?
Yeah.
I think you go to jail for forcing yourself on someone, but kind of losing the train. But yeah, so, if your desire is to have fun, or you like to joke around, or you like a certain type of music or whatever, that's part of you. That's fine. Embrace it and redeem it,
Yep.
That's like we mentioned music earlier. There's a style of music that I love, and there weren't a lot of options for that when I became a Christian, and then I went, okay, well, I'll make it then.
Yep.
Yeah. So you helped me and Dakota during our divorces with some perspective, and we appreciate that for sure. How much of being a pastor is counseling, and how do you see that as part of your duties, or do you accept that role?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've, as I mentioned earlier, I'm always re-examining things, and that's one of the things I've looked at and realized it's not my gift. I have some ability there, and I've tried to make it better by taking classes and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, I think especially in ministry, but you see it in every field, there are people that are willing to take on jobs that they should have handed off.
Yeah.
You know, and so like I'll meet with anybody once, you know, and then let's figure out, is this something I can really help you with, or do you need like medical help, you know, or you know, maybe you need to see, here's a counselor that specializes in that, and that's comes back to that being naked and unashamed, being intellectually honest, right? You're not an expert at everything, you know? And so, yeah, there's certain things I'm willing to counsel with people on, and I'll do my best, but do I think it's my duty in that role? No, I think my duty is to serve people with whatever gifts I have. Mm-hmm. And that's not just in my position, that's your duty as a human, you know? And so like, if I came to you for advice, I'm sure you'd be willing to give it to me. And then I started telling you about something that you have no idea about. If you're honest, you'll go, look, I'm not the one to advise you. Mm-hmm. You know, unfortunately, most people are not honest, and they'll just bluff some answer that, you know, got you out of the room, but didn't help them at all.
Yep. So I think about that a lot in business too. I was just thinking about that. It's like, okay, like in business, you have to wear all the hats sometimes, especially when you're first starting off. You have to. It is what it is, but like you got to find what is your calling and what's your gift as well, to like actually be able to, you know, like you said, help other people in life in general. Because like if it's draining you or you're not giving good advice, you're not helping anybody. If it's pulling from you and taking from you, and you're like, I feel drained when I do this, then like that's not your gift, and like that's not what you should be doing. You need to hand that off to somebody else and then find out what your gift is and what you're good at. And that's the only way you can actually be successful in business or in life or in pastor or anything.
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest call we have is just to pour out good into other people's lives. Yeah. Right. But you can't pour out of an empty cup, is the old expression, right? And if you're constantly doing the things that drain you and empty you, you're just setting yourself up for failure, for disaster. You know? And I've been there. I feel really bad. When you were first getting into this field that you're in now, I was in a pretty dark place, and so I know that was not very encouraging to you. I gave you a lot of probably negative advice at the time.
I don't remember any of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, I really don't.
Because it was bad advice, so hopefully that none of it stuck.
Yeah, I don't remember any of it.
But yeah, because, you know, I've worked in real estate for a long time, and I just was, you know, in kind of a sour mood for a while. So I remember when you're first getting started, all I really told you were all the things that can go wrong and that you should look out for without giving you any really helpful advice. So.
Well, I think that's probably the reason I probably don't remember is because that's very, very common. Yeah. Is that like everybody talks about everything that could possibly go wrong in almost every scenario, but like for me, I don't know. I don't even remember barely any of it. And I talk to people a lot about that. I was like, man, there's people, whenever I hear that, I'm like, I remember that the person that's telling you that is telling you because they want to protect you, they want to love you, and that's why I always remind people like, hey, like if your parents are telling you certain things, because like parents want to love you, but they also want to protect you, so they'll tell you not to do things that they think you're going to get hurt in, even though it could potentially be something great, but then they also base it on, you know, like again, we talk about like the presuppositions, they base it on things that they've seen in their lives, and it's always difficult to help somebody through things, but at the same time, like, you know, like if you never, like you said, invested or done anything, then it's hard to like give people advice for something that you haven't actually done either. So then it's like, man, like how do I give the advice?
I think, you know, most of us operate by default. We operate out of a, you know, scarcity mentality, you know, and like I've caught up myself with, you know, growing up, we were really poor and didn't always have things, you know, much to eat or whatever. So I get on to my kids about you threw that plate away when you know there were still two good nuggets on that plate. Well, we're a far cry from them having to worry about food. You know, why am I stressing that? So there's some good things I can take from it about being frugal and conservative. Yeah, but but I don't need to install this fear in them that they have no need for, you know. And a lot of times when people are giving you that negative advice, that's where it's coming from. And like you said, they may love you and they're just afraid of you, you know, making a mistake or going without or,
And sometimes it's not even necessarily like a negative. Like I don't even always see it as negative. It's more like I said, protection. And like I remember like whenever we first started, like Tony had a lot of those, and I was like, dude, we're gonna be fine. I don't know if you remember what your thoughts were. What were your
Oh yeah,
parents
well, I
saying?
was scared. I would have been out of the company if you wouldn't have kept me in. My dad was definitely like, "Oh, I know that area. You definitely should not buy a house there. There's all kinds of crime there. It's not a good area. I know people who bought houses down there and they haven't done very well." And so I think it meant we kind of ended up really finally asking one of our mentors who has what we wanted. And so that was kind of like the key, where it was like, who has gotten where we want to go? When you ask that mentor, then they give you a lot more like, well, this is what I've done in my experience, and this is what I think would work. And this is a really good little hook into the next question. So you've been with your wife a long time. You guys have been through a lot together. How have you managed to stay married for so long, and what relationship advice would you give to other people who want that long-lasting relationship with their forever person?
You know, we still have our struggles, but my wife's mom was married, I think, 4 times, and mine was married 3. Dad was married 3, I think. So we'd seen what a broken marriage looks like. That was the model we did have. And early on, I remember I told her, I'm like, look, I know what divorce looks like. This is going to be my one and only marriage. You know, I will not divorce you, but I know where to hide your body. And she said, I already have a spot picked out for yours. And I said, okay, we're good. You know, in all seriousness, you have to approach it, I think, as, look, we're in this. There is no escape. You know, there is no, I'm going to go live with my parents or whatever. You know, we're in this together, and we're just going to make it work. You know, it's weird when you look at the statistics on marriage. You know, the marriages that have the highest success rate are arranged marriages.
Yeah. I remember I have a friend of mine that was telling me that he's Indian.
Yeah. Now, I'm not for that system, right? I'm not saying that's a good thing. But I think part of why they have a high success rate, well, for one, it's a cultural thing. But 2, these people were trained to, here's how you're supposed to treat your spouse, whoever they are. And if you do those things, it works, you know. And also being aware that no other person is responsible for my happiness. It is not your job to make me happy. It is not your job to fulfill me, right? Your spouse's role should be to add to those things and not take away from it. But if you're depending on some other person to make you happy, that person doesn't exist other than, in my opinion, in Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of relationships fail, right? Is I love you, but I'm not in love anymore, right? Because you don't make me feel happy. Well, you're just unhappy. And maybe I'm doing some things to exacerbate that, but I'm not the source or the root of it, you know? Although some people maybe really are the source. I don't know. But yeah, having, you know, unexpressed expectations are going to be unmet expectations. You know, if you're not clear about what you're trying to get out of a relationship, you're always going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's been, you know, like I said, we still have our moments where we get really frustrated with each other. And she probably gets more frustrated with me, you know. But we know that, like, you know, there's, at the end of the day, we're, you know, this relationship is to death, you know.
Yeah.
And so, hey, you're going to have to figure it out, you know. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that people just give up too easy, you know, or they go into the relationship knowing that I can give up.
Yeah.
Right. Or, you know, if you go in with, even in, you know, in an investment, if you just know that, well, if anything else, I know I can just dump it to, you know, this one guy and I'll only make $1,000.
Right.
Well, you're probably going to take advantage of that opportunity more than you should. But if you're like, hey, we're in this, we've got to find a way to make this work.
Usually
You'll find a way.
Yeah. So how do you balance, like, I mean, you're a pretty ambitious person. You like to accomplish things. I feel like that's like a guy thing. It feels like, you know, guys just want to go out and accomplish and like get stuff done and do things. Have you ever felt like you want to get that stuff done so much more that you don't desire your wife or like spending time with them? And like, if you do, how do you actually like change that? Because obviously, you know, you talk about, to me, it sounds like it was a commitment thing. You committed, and it is what it is. And that's the way I felt with my marriage, is like, I'm committed. And so now it doesn't matter what happens. You can do whatever. I'm committed. But then how do you actually, like, because that's not the kind of relationship that I ever want again. I want to actually want and desire that person. How do you change that, where you're like, I'm trying to build and like reach my potential on who I'm supposed to be as a man, but then at the same time, like, still be the person I'm supposed to be, like, all together and desire it? Because that's the problem, is I lost the desire to actually want to be present sometimes.
Yeah, you know, that's a danger. I think, especially for, I'm going to speak in generalities and probably offend some people with gender norms and stuff, but I think in general, you guys are, you know, goal oriented, and, you know, we get focused on the thing we're going to do, and our wives or girlfriends like to talk about their feelings, and that can, whether intentionally or not, can come across as criticism, right? And when I'm trying to get going in a positive direction, the last thing I need is your negativity and your criticism, right? And so I think, for one, learning to hear that as they're just pouring their heart out to you, not just telling you you suck, you know. But that's a difficult thing, you know. In the Bible, there's some very, very clear direction about how a husband is supposed to treat a wife, and vice versa. And when I've talked to people whose relationships have failed, you know, sometimes there are just weird things that happen, and there's no way to explain it. This just went off the rails. But most of the time, we can go through that list and find that you weren't doing most of these.
Right.
You were busy with other things. And, you know, and to make it as generalized as possible, what it boils down to is men are commanded to love their wives unconditionally and make them feel safe and secure no matter what. And women are commanded to honor their husbands, and, you know, make him feel respected and that he matters, right? The interesting thing about that is that both people should be doing both, right? You should treat your wife with respect and honor her, and she should love you, right? But we're never commanded to do a thing that we would already do, right? You don't have to command someone to breathe. You just do it. And part of that thing that's baked into you, I believe, is that men do not automatically, by nature, show love, right? We show love by doing things, right?
Right.
By working hard. Yeah, we have no problem with making sure we're providing.
Right.
But to make her feel safe and secure doesn't just mean build a house. Makes, there's more to it than that. And so we have to be commanded to do this thing because we'll forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing. She has to be reminded to, hey, he really needs to know that you're for him and not against him. And, because it's not going to come naturally to them. And I know I just offended everybody with, but hey, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is.
I say it kind of sounds like going back to what you said earlier about like the kids and their desires and stuff. I guess like, it's basically about doing what's best instead of doing what you want to do, which is, I don't know, for me, I struggle with a lot because I'm like, man, I just wanted to like change my heart and desire it. That's what I want. I'm like, man, why can't I just want to do this? Like, because like when I'm like building businesses and stuff, like it's the most fun thing in the world to me. Like, I'm like, man, I want to do this all the time. Like, I want that desire for other things too. And I've never found it. And I'm like, man, I really wish I could just create that desire in myself.
Well, see, the building business thing, I know this word doesn't seem like it applies, but it is easy for you. I know it's a lot of work.
Right.
But it's easy for you to get out of bed in the morning and go, I am going to go.
Yeah.
Because it's how you're wired, right?
Right.
And, life is about, play to your strengths, but also do the thing that isn't easy, right? And, what you're asking for is, hey, how do I make this thing that doesn't come naturally to me come naturally to me?
Right.
Well,
do it more.
Yeah, do it more. Yeah. You can repeat things and it becomes a habit and eventually it becomes just part of who you are, but it's not going to come naturally unless you work at it. Yeah. And I know your situation. I know you worked at it, but
I'm still working at it. I'm just like, that's why I asked the question, because I'm still working at it. I'm like trying to figure out, I'm like, man, I really do want to desire that. And like, I'm trying to figure it out. But
yeah, I'm still trying to get myself to desire salads, and it's not working. But I keep trying them anyway.
Yep.
You want to start working on wrapping this up, or you want to stretch it out a little bit longer? We still got like a handful of questions here.
Yeah, we got to get into
time if you do.
I was saying we got to get into this one.
All right.
There's one question I wanted to get into. It might be a little.
If anybody's still listening after all this,
they definitely are. This one might get a little controversial.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Now we got to get into the real estate stuff a little bit. So we got to talk about Mr. Dave.
Dave Ramsey.
Yes, Mr. Dave Ramsey. We got to talk about him. So first of all, I want to hear your thoughts, because I know the church always like has Dave Ramsey stuff, and like obviously there's a lot of good that comes from Dave Ramsey. So I want to hear your perception of him, and then just in the mix of that, I would just want to know if have you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Yes.
Okay. So then I just want you to talk about mostly Dave Ramsey, but then like talk a little bit about both and like your perception of each.
Okay, so my wife and I, we went through Financial Peace, is Dave's
course,
bread and butter course. Yeah. We went through that years ago, and it really did help us reverse some trends in our finances. Because, like I said, we were kids that were raised by kids, who never had any money, so we didn't know how to handle money.
Yep.
And so I think his system has a real place and a real use. And you mentioned like our church sometimes offers that course, and who we're offering that for, or who we're intending it for, are, couples who they've never been able to get their crap together long enough to buy a house.
Right.
They're living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have more than a couple $100s in the bank, and they're in collections and that kind of stuff. I think his system is great for that, for making you like really take an honest look at your finances. Because that, for us, a lot of it was, we never put in the work to really see where the money went, because we didn't want to know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because, when we have a little bit of extra money, we wanted to be able to go out to eat and not think about, well, we should have paid more on that credit card or whatever.
Yep.
You know, so there's some good concepts there, right? Learn, know where your money goes. Have an emergency fund.
Yep.
That's about where it stops, I think.
Yeah.
I think his system is not about building wealth. It's about getting some financial health.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I mean, other people may disagree, and I haven't gone into, I know he has some stuff that has more to do with like estate planning and all, maybe there's more of that. But the thing he's most known for, have your $1,000 emergency fund and all that, which that's funny, because he came up with this system 25, 30 years ago. What emergency would $1,000 solve in your life right now?
A very small one.
Yeah, that number needs to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
But 30 years ago, that $1,000 went.
Right.
Either way, still the idea of having $1,000 that you don't immediately go out and spend on a new TV and stuff is foreign to a lot of people.
Yep.
So I think it's a good tool. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a very different mindset, right? It's about, okay, we're going to get out of that famine, mentality, and we're going to look at how do I build something going forward.
Yep.
And for most of us, most Americans are not in that place in their lives. Yeah. Most people, if they were out of work for 2 weeks, would be in dire straits.
Yep.
And so that, we're still kind of working through that. We have one investment property, but I had some bigger plans to do some other things. But I realized that I was a little bit payment poor. When I tried to get some financing put together, even though I know I could make it on paper, it doesn't look that way. So now I'm like, all right, next step is we're going to knock this payment out and, be able to, I may explore other, options or whatever, but I know that that's a hindrance, right? And so for me, if I went without making money for, I have a little more than 2 weeks of leeway, but I know that I'm one disaster away from real financial disaster too. So I think Rich Dad Poor Dad does a great job of at least getting you thinking about your money differently, right?
Yes.
Is it a tool or is it a survival mechanism? So.
I'll say, because I was thinking, like, as you're talking, I was like, man, I agree with that a lot. Like, basically what you're talking about is, like, I agree with, like, you have to have a budget, and, like, other people, like, who follow, you can follow Dave Ramsey too hard, and you can follow Robert Kiyosaki too hard, too, where they're like, oh, man, you shouldn't even have a budget, and don't worry about your spending stuff. I'm like, you guys are crazy, because, like, the only way that you can ever actually start to get wealth is by saving up front. I guess you could create another way, but the thing that really, like, as you were just talking there, makes me think is the mindset difference, though, is Dave Ramsey is very much like conserve. Can I afford that? Those are the questions that you're asking yourself. Can I afford it? Should I do it? Conserve. And then Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Is it in our budget?
Yeah. And then Rich Dad Poor Dad's mindset is more about, or Robert Kiyosaki rather, his is more about how can I do this? And so to me, it was a complete different shift of like, okay, like you talk about, okay, my debt to income's off, so the banks aren't funding. But another question that you could ask is, how can I still get this? You can go borrow it. You can go do this. And then like, that's really the question, because like, if we were just relying on the banks, Tony and I wouldn't have bought the last 25 properties.
Yeah. That's what's really funny too is we have 63 doors ish now.
Yeah, 64. Yep.
And I'm still not bankable, so I live in one of our rental properties. But if our tax accountant gets our taxes done here soon, we get everything back, I'll probably be in a position where I can get my own personal home.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, all the rules, regulations, and things like that. But the point was just, asking how can it be done is a powerful question.
Yeah, I think Dave wants you to save your way to wealth, which doesn't work.
Yeah.
And other schools of thought are, well, you're just going to have to earn more.
Yeah.
And you need a little bit of both, right? You need some responsibility, But yeah, so like the example I brought up of the debt to income ratio thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's making me look at other avenues, but also it really got me just aware of a car payment. That payment for 5 years or whatever could easily be the payment on 1 or 2 properties.
Yep.
Right, depending on what your car payment is.
Yep.
Even a low, like a $300 car payment, well, that's the payment on a $70,000-$80,000 mortgage. So I'm not against leveraging debt. Just be smart with what debt you have and how you're going to use it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how many people are not. I was in car sales, as you know, but I was selling cars, and people are not scared to get a $500, $600, $700 payment on a Jeep Wrangler, but they're so scared of getting an investment property that's going to pay them money. I'm like, I don't get it. I literally don't get it. They're like, I'm so scared of the investments, and I think it does have to do with other people. Like, well, what if it breaks down? What if this? What if that? And I'm like, but the Jeep could do the same thing. Is way more likely. Yeah. So I always thought it was interesting that they'll go in debt $50,000, $60,000 for a car, but they think that a house is risky. And I do think that a lot of times it's just the mindset, or it's like.
It's a weird thing about how our economy works too, because I can go on my lunch break and borrow $70,000 for a
car
SUV.
Yeah.
And spend 3 months trying to get approved for a $70,000 home loan.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
So there's something. I don't have an answer for that one.
I got the answer, but I can't say it on air. But.
Well, people will pay. Yeah, people will pay their car payment. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the only answer. Let's just say that
push some papers across the table.
Yeah, say dealerships can say you make however amount of much money that you need to make if you have a certain credit score.
Yeah.
So that's really how it happens, and there's not as much regulations on cars. As there is with mortgages, and I don't know
the car crash of 2008.
Yeah, I was gonna say you were in the business back in that time. So was the same thing going on where they could put whatever income they wanted? Or
yeah, I'm old enough that I remember when there were. It was a fairly common occurrence to see a stated income closing. You could buy whatever $500,000 property, and you just write down that I make $1 million a year.
Yep.
And if your credit score and you've got some bank statements to show you've got some money in the bank or whatever, we'll prove it.
Wow.
And yeah, that was back in the Wild West when we were doing 120% loan to value loans, and
man,
yeah.
If we could do that,
yeah.
we would. I would say we would be a lot further than where we're at right now. Because like Tony was talking about, our tax accountant still hasn't got our taxes done. She already filed an extension on them. We haven't had our profit and loss for it's been 8 months now. And so we stopped being bankable. And so then we're like, all right, well, the rich dad, poor dad thing. Okay, how can we make this work now? Because we can't borrow the money anymore from the bank. So then now we're borrowing it from individuals. So Tony sent out an email to a bunch of private money lenders. We found 5 or 6 more private money lenders, and then bam, we got them all funded. But it was at a cost. But at the same time, obviously, we're going to make more money. Because that's another thing that I've noticed people look at is if you're, a big fan of Dave Ramsey or other people, oh, don't pay any interest or anything like that. And it's okay, but if
even the interest rate that we're paying, a lot of times people are like, dude, that's nuts. You guys are paying 10 to 12% interest. And we're like, yeah, there's $50,000 of equity there.
Yeah.
When I first got started as a loan officer, was late 90s. I was 5 years old. But I remember back then we were refinancing people down to 9%.
Wow.
And they were ecstatic to have a single-digit interest rate. So people have a really distorted idea of what a good rate is, because I still do closings. I'm not a loan officer anymore. I'm a closing agent, title closing agent. And I'll still see people grumble about, oh, yeah, I got 4.5%. And I'm like,
that's true.
Your parents or your grandparents were paying 18% back in the 80s for their house. So, these are still, even though the rates are on the rise, they're still historically low, and 9 or 10% or whatever on private money. That's still great.
That's what we look at. As long as we can still build and do the things that we need to do, I don't care what the interest rate is. If we're going to be able to make money on it, I'll pay them half. I don't really care. Like for us, it's like more about just making sure obviously the business is still running, but then also like honoring what we said to these people. Because I remember this is gonna sound crazy to most people, but I remember on a Facebook post, there's a real estate investor place. Somebody had a property under contract, and then they let other people know that, you know, they didn't have the money for it. And everybody was just making fun of them and like all this other stuff. And that's bullcrap. And I was like, it is funny to me how often Tony and I put properties under contract that we have no idea how we're going to get the money. And like, sometimes it keeps me up at night a little bit, but like, well, oh yeah, I talked to you that one time when I was stressed out. That happens often because we put so many properties under contract. It's just an astronomical number, and then we always find the money. So like, it's interesting how you can find it as long as you think of how can I do it instead of like, can I do it? And it's because it's just a completely different mindset. And so we always just find a way, and we have, and I guess that's how we built to where we have. Obviously, it's sometimes a little risky because if there's a huge downturn and then you're buying the properties or whatever, then that's where you might struggle a little bit. But
I think that, you know, that comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that mindset or commitment, you know, even with your relationships and with deals. Okay, we're committed. We're under contract. Yeah. We've got to find a way.
Yep.
You know, because if you always go into it with, well, worst case scenario, we lose $500 earnest money or something, you know, you're not going to close those deals.
That's a good point.
You know,
I never thought about that because that's what a lot of other investors do. They're like, oh, worst case scenario, we have a contingency in there that we back out. And like, I don't think of it like that. I think of it like, we gave this person our word. They're now moving their properties. They're moving all their stuff around. We're going to make this happen no matter what. We're going to find a way. And the same thing, we're willing to give up like almost everything. Like if we got to give up all the money that we're going to make, like it is what it is. We've made $0 on deals just because we had to honor what we've lost money on deals, because we're going to honor what we said we're going to do because we know we're affecting people's lives in a major way.
Yeah, that, you know, for a lot of people, you know, their word doesn't have the weight that it should.
Yeah.
You know? But you know, if you're going to lead a life of truth, is the thing we keep talking about, right? Then I committed to this. I'm going to come through because what I say matters. And you know, if you hopefully you don't have to do that very often, but those deals where you have lost just to, you know, to keep your word, that stuff comes back to you.
Right.
You know, I know I've told you this story a bunch of times, but you know, back in the Old Testament, there's Abraham and Lot, and they both have you know, their own people and animals and stuff, and it gets to where there's too many of them, and Lot's people are causing problems, and so Abraham, who basically has the deed to all this land that they're in, goes to Lot and he says, you know, we can't stay together. We need to split up. You pick whatever direction you want. You go that way, and that land, I'll give that land to you. And so he's losing a little to save the relationship. You know, and if you're willing to do that, to preserve that relationship most of the time is going to be more valuable than that one deal. Yep. You know, because part of what you do is probably built on those relationships of, you know, hey, they bought my house, here's their number. Yep. You know, you get some repeat business, hopefully.
Yep.
You know?
And not just that, but then also like other wholesalers and then other private money lenders, like they know like, hey, like we can trust these people, like, because if there's a downturn, we're not the kind of people who's like, oh, we got no money into this, let's just give it back. We're not those kind of people, because no, this person trusts us with their money. We're going to see it through and we're going to finish it out. So yeah, that's a good point, that has to do with our commitment and like what our word was. We don't look at like, oh, it's just a little bit of a loss. It's more like, no, we committed to this and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, your word is worth way more than, you know, this little bit of money you might lose on this deal. And because that's what's going to be with you longer. Yeah. And what is going to probably help you get other deals, because people will be like, these guys will treat you right, or these guys they're going to come through, you know. Yeah, I think that matters way more than squeezing out a little bit of extra profit on one deal.
Yeah. For me, this will be the last question, then we go into some closing questions. But for me, it has to do with more like the bigger purpose. Like, you know, the reason of like, I've noticed now, like I've got gifts and there's purpose. And obviously like the gifts I've been given, like you said, it's very easy for me. Like I know now that I've been given a gift, and so is Tony. So is like everybody that's with us. Like we've all been given gifts. You have a ton of gifts. And so like you're using those. So how do you find your purpose with those gifts? Cause like, even now I'm like, okay, I know without a doubt that I have a gift in business. I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to be using it. I know that this is a part of it, and like integrity and showing that you can do things the right way is a part of it, but I'm not exactly sure what's next, because I don't feel like this is 100% it either. So how do you find, like, you know, using your gifts and then finding your purpose? Have you found a way to try to align those, or like how do you know that you're on the right path?
Man, you know, there's so many different tools out there. Like I'm a big fan of the Enneagram. I don't know if you've ever looked into that. You know, it just helps you kind of know yourself a little. You know, these are my tendencies. So here are things that stress me, and here are things that, you know, give me energy. So, you know, learning to know yourself, and then the more you know yourself, you'll know other people better, is helpful. But what is it? I'm trying to remember the quote. I'm losing it. The one inventor basically said, you know, inspiration is it's, you know, found through your work. It finds you working, right? And the Bible backs that up too, right? That is, if you're faithful in a few things, then you'll be given more. And blessings are found when you're being faithful to what you do know, right? You know, finding that perfect marriage of your talents and abilities, and, you know, the right situation for them. Maybe some of it's luck, I don't know, but I think a lot of it is just, you know, making sure you're putting in the work, right? You're constantly working at what you know you are gifted at, and I just think, you know, it'll find you. A lot of people spend their whole lives working hard at just working hard, you know, and not at what they were really made for. And if you're working toward what know how you're wired, and then work toward it, you know, I think those scenarios present themselves. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I think that you're living out your purpose. I mean, I definitely think that you're meant to be a pastor, a leader, you know, sometimes a counselor. You've influenced me a lot in my life, which obviously is like, has a trickle effect where I get to now help other people. You've helped, you know, Tony and I with going through like hard things in our lives and stuff. So yeah, I just really appreciate you living out your purpose too. So,
well, you know, I appreciate both of you guys. You make me really proud. But here's something I'd encourage you to do is think back to when you were a little kid. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I felt like I wanted to be, it depends on what age, but I remember when I was very young, it was like a police officer. When I was like, you know, 14, it was definitely like a business owner.
Okay.
And that was about it.
What about you, Tony? I think back as early as you can remember.
Well, I think of this, and now I can relate it to me now, because I originally just wanted to make like comics. So I wanted other people to like look at my comics or read my comics, but then I would also make games. I also create things. Really what I want is to create something that other people do. Like I want people to be part of my thing. I just want to design a game, create a thing, like something artistic and creative. People are like, wow, Tony did that. I want to be part of that thing that Tony made.
So you want to influence people. You know, I was thinking about this a while back, because I'm, you know, obviously a little further in life than you guys are, and I'm at that point where you start going, oh, am I ever going to reach these goals, or I never reached that goal. So I was thinking back to when I was little. I remember I wanted to I either wanted to be a writer, like like write novels, a history teacher, a juggler.
A professional one?
Yeah. I'm just being honest, right? And I can't remember. There were a couple other ones, but I wrote all these things down. These are the things I wanted to be when I was little. And then I'm looking at my life, and I'm like, I've done all of these, just in different ways, right? I teach primarily the Old Testament. I have a degree in Old Testament studies, right? So it's a little bit of history, right? I teach. I do some teaching. I write all the time. I write articles. I write sermons, devotions, things like that. I juggle. I have 6 kids and a business and two different careers. Basically, I'm juggling things all the time. Instead of looking at like how you've not measured up or not reached some goal, I bet you have in some way. You're just not. You've lost perspective. You're not making comics, but you're doing things. You're putting content out into the world that influences people and draws people into your world.
I do our newsletter. That's kind of like a comic.
Well, there you go.
Yes, basically. Yeah. I always just struggle with, I guess, like for me, I always feel like, man, like there's something more that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, I guess. And like, I don't know. I'm always like, man, am I doing what I'm supposed to? Like what God has created me for, basically, And that's always the question I ask, which is like big. But I was actually at a Bible study on Monday, and it was something that hit me hard. Is like they just said, I can't remember what it was from, Habakkuk or maybe it was from something with an H. It was a weird name with an H, but they just said, consider your ways. And I was like, wow. Like consider your ways and like always remember like basically, why you're doing it. And that's always been very difficult for me just because like I made a commitment and I can fulfill that, but it's always like why and the purpose behind it, I guess. I feel like it's easier to have that purpose if like you're a pastor because then it's like, all right, like obviously I'm doing what God wants me to do because I'm a pastor.
That's, you caught me on my phone. I was trying to look up a verse that I couldn't remember. That's one of the things I find funny is people assume, oh, you're a pastor, so then you're doing everything right, and that's just not the case,
Yeah.
The guy that claims that is a liar, that is one area that I feel like God called me to do or to work in, but I don't do it perfectly, I'm not. Always fulfilling my ultimate purpose in life all the time,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest realizations I've had in the last few years. And I know I've talked to you about this. Is I had this moment where I realized there are no grown-ups. There just aren't. I was in a situation where something went wrong, and I'm like, oh, man, somebody should do something. And then I looked around and went, oh, crap, I'm that guy. I'm the one that has to do something, And as a kid, you just think adults have everything figured out. And,
Yep.
That person was born to be a teacher. That person was born to be a cop and whatever. And the reality is most of us have kind of stumbled into whatever it is we're doing, So the moment you realize there are no real experts, even the ones that are officially experts really aren't, then it makes things, I think, more wide open and possible, right? Because you somehow got to where you are. Why can't I?
Right.
But I know that, you have that desire to make sure you're fulfilling your purpose. And this was the verse I was looking for. Micah 6:8 says, "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you?" This is what your purpose is, right? But to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. To know that you don't know everything. To make sure that other people are cared for and matter. And to strive for what's right. And you'll find your purpose in that, I think.
I like it.
Or not. I don't know.
I hope so.
So this last question's a fun one. It's another softball. So it's not at all.
Okay.
So 50 years from now, you're on your deathbed. What is your legacy? It could be a billboard, a paragraph, a small message, something that you want to tell to the world.
Yeah, real softball, Tony. Thank you. Thanks for not giving me any warning about the question, summarize your life, right?
In one sentence.
It's your message too. It's like something that you think that the world needs to hear, or your legacy.
Read more, listen more, speak less. Chase truth and be fully aware that it is available, right? It can be found. And there is one general manager of the universe, and you are not it.
Have you seen Hamilton?
I have.
All right.
I
That's
have.
what it just made me think of. Talk less. Smile more. That's what it made me think of when you said that.
Yeah, I think most people do not listen. When I'm talking to you, for the most part, you're thinking of what you're going to say next, listening for keywords. Oh, he said boat. I know. I have a boat story.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right?
In case Peter cuts one off.
But the Bible says that where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. And it's better to be silent and thought a fool than to open your mouth and prove it.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit less. Even when you're negotiating, right?
Absolutely.
It's really easy to talk yourself out of a good deal. Listen more and listen to what do you really need, and I think you can meet someone else's needs and your own if you're really looking for the right opportunity.
Yep, that's what I always talk to like our sales guys about is like, dude, you need to talk a whole lot less. You should not be talking. You should talk 10% of the time. They should be talking 90% of the time. And basically what you're doing is you're pointing the questions to find out what they actually like need or want and how you can actually help them accomplish that. And we can still accomplish what we need to accomplish. Because the more you talk, like sometimes like, dude, you over-explain that. They don't care and they don't even know what you're saying. Like you're using words that don't matter. So just ask questions and find out like what they actually want. So, but yeah, that's the most important thing in sales. Ask. Just ask.
Yeah, ask questions and then really listen.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have had a cooler answer for that summarize your life thing.
It's still different. It's still different than everybody else who's ever came on. So
yeah, I wish I had more time. I wanted to go into like talking about being a dad, but I got to go to the bathroom so bad. So.
Oh yeah. Well, if you want me to come back and offend more people on your show, I'd be willing to do that. So.
I don't think anybody's gonna be too offended.
I'm pretty sure you offended the Catholic Church, and so why not? Next time we'll try to find another group to offend.
Yeah, if I offended you, Catholic Church, I'm sorry. I love you. And for the capitalist out there,
I offended Republicans and capitalists.
Yes,
so
we still love you too.
Absolutely.
But cool. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Love you guys.
Love you. Thank you guys for watching. We love you guys too. Appreciate your support. Peace.
Peace.